6:30, and this is the time for the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget. It's a period for public comment. The budget was discussed at length during the budget hearings back in November, so if you didn't have an opportunity to provide comment now is the time for official comment to be heard. Is there anybody who wishes to comment on the 2024 borough budget? And do we have anybody by Zoom who wishes to? Does council wish to make any final comments? This is a very short hearing. So the hearing on the budget is adjourned. And so we will begin then at 6:45. We have a series of public hearings that'll go one after another. So you all can chat for another 13, 14 minutes. All right, thank you. 45. I'm going to call to order the first in a series of public hearings. The first is public hearing on amendments to the comprehensive plan with respect to the use of the urban mixed-use district. And before we take public comment, I'm going to have Mr. Woolston give an overview of the comprehensive plan amendments.
Sure. The comprehensive plan for Carlisle Borough was adopted in 2012 and was updated in 2019. It's comprised of several documents. A lot of it's text and some of it's, map areas where land use activities are sort of articulated. What's intended for the area, what ought to be regulated a certain way. And tonight, council has the opportunity to act on a comprehensive plan change that would it would sort of refine the comprehensive planning area around Frog Switch, the tract around Frog Switch, which is about 30 acres, and it's zoned currently industrial or I-1 general industrial. In the comprehensive plan, again, what enables that regulation change, the comprehensive plan delineates an industrial area, which is the bulk of that parcel. It also delineates a small area for commercial use up on High Street, and it has a small area that's residential. Again, these aren't zoning districts, it's a land use map, and that land use map that's adopted by council enables regulation changes. So the map currently indicates mixed use zoning could be possible, but because of the way it's sort of discussed or described within the comprehensive plan with sort of single-use zoning and different tracts, the staff advice was to go ahead and update the comprehensive plan to reflect what's been done in other industrial areas when a zoning change is considered. Other parts of the borough that are former manufacturing sites have been rezoned urban mixed use, and some long-range planning efforts happened separate from the comp plan. There was a brownfield redevelopment plan and some mixed-use planning efforts that were done, again, sort of separate from the comprehensive planning. But again, staff sort of reviewed those efforts and the comprehensive plan, and this tract wasn't specifically talked about for mixed use. Again, with those individual single-use tracts, it has the appearance of a mixed use possibility, but it was, in staff's judgment, a cleaner approach to update the comprehensive plan and articulate mixed use zoning for that tract. So again, that's sort of what's contemplated tonight.
Okay, thank you for the overview. So we will also have, it's sort of interrelated, we'll have a separate hearing on the zoning amendment. That will come next, but does anybody have any comment on the comprehensive plan amendment? I see a confused look. You're good? Okay. All right, and anyone? Do we have anybody by Zoom, Stephanie? Okay. Then I'm going to adjourn the public hearing on the comprehensive plan amendment, and we're going to roll right into the zoning amendment public hearing. So this is a hearing on the amendment to the zoning map ordinance by rezoning certain parcels to urban mixed use zoning. And Jared, if you want to give an overview of those zoning amendments.
Sure. You want me to go over both zoning amendments or just the mixed use one?
Well, go over both. Yes.
So that again, the mixed use zoning is sort of considered for the Frog Switch tract. We're all sort of familiar with. The staff went through a public survey to gather feedback. We've advised council on this a couple times now, and our land use reform subcommittee has sort of considered, the sort of usefulness of the urban mixed use zoning district for that tract. And the public surveying indicated that that was the right approach to go with mixed use. And in terms of our zoning tools that are available to council now, urban mixed use is probably the best tool in the bag. So again, this is only for the Frog Switch tract. It's been delineated on public documents, and it would sort of take that general industrial zoning district that I mentioned before, the small tract that's zoned commercial, general commercial C3, and it would take the entire tract and change it to urban mixed use zoning. The small sliver that was delineated in the comprehensive plan for residential use was not adopted with regulations, but again, this sort of mapping informs this recommendation for urban mixed use zoning. So that's that piece, and then the parking. We want to get into that next.
Yeah, why don't we pause there, and then we'll take public comment on that item. So is there any public comment on the zoning amendment? If you'll come up to the podium, we'll need your name and address, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jen McDuffie. Our residential address is 702 North Pitt Street. My husband and I are invested in this decision because my husband's business is at 50 Spruce Street. And the bike gang is in on this also. Mitch is going to present 178 signatures on a petition that is twofold. It's supporting the rezoning of that area to urban mixed use, but it is also suggesting that a consideration be given to encourage the inclusion of a light industrial transportation lane through that area. And for anybody who doesn't know, it's kind of a glorified bike lane, but it's wider. It is intended to be two-way and accommodate wheelchairs, skateboards, strollers, bicycles, pedestrians. So it would be a safe way for people to get from one end of town to the other. We got 178 signatures, 3 of us in 7 days. And what struck us is 95% or over 95% of the people we talked to really liked the idea. And these folks came from 6 different areas in town, which included the Spruce Street neighborhood, the residential neighborhood where we live, and both vendors, shop owners, and people who were patrons of people all over downtown. We were just walking downtown. So that's what we had to say. And there's a map of what we think would be a really good layout for the light individual transportation lane, in case you want to know what the cyclists in town think. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Mr. Ravino, we know who you are, but we need the name and address for the record, please.
My name's Rick Ravino. My address is 112 Spring Farm Circle, Carlisle. It's South Middleton Township. For the record, I'm the owner of Minerva Mills, which is the 400 block of East Lowther Street. Some of you may not know, but when I purchased it with my father so many years ago, it was zoned heavy industrial I-1. As you may know, it's effectively over the course of many years been transformed into a mixed-use commercial. So I kind of see this as a kind of natural extension for what we've done there. So I'm generally supportive of it. Certainly want to participate with anybody who wishes to work. I realize it's a collaborative effort, but we're here to be part of that and help in any way we can. So that's all, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment on this zoning map amendment? Do we have anybody by Zoom? Okay, and I'll note that this too was advertised and posted. So we'll adjourn that hearing, and we'll move into the next zoning amendment. This is on. Let me pull up and read it. So this is an amendment to the residential off-street parking zoning ordinance by reducing minimum parking requirements for dwelling units. If Jared, you would give us an overview of that one, please.
This is a relatively straightforward text amendment to the zoning ordinance. It would reduce the parking requirement for dwelling units that have a studio or single bedroom down to a one parking space per unit, and dwelling units with two or more bedrooms would be required to have 2 spaces. The current requirement for apartments buildings is to provide a parking space for every bedroom within every unit. So this would be a reduction of what is required for off-street parking for dwellings.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? I see none. Any by Zoom? Okay, and this again, this was duly advertised. Seeing no public comment, I will adjourn this hearing, and then we will reconvene at 7 o'clock with a regular meeting, and you'll see a series of votes on these items during that agenda. Thank you all. Okay. All right, folks. The time is now 7:01, and I'll call to order this December 14th, 2023 regular Borough Council meeting. We will begin with his final moment of silence from Councilor Crampsey.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So tonight, as we close out this year and enter into the holiday season, I wanted us all to take a moment to reflect on what a great community we live in, and how lucky we are to have a place like Carlisle and an amazing staff that we have, and these great folks that I get to serve with. Now the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, the roll, please.
Mr. Crampsey,
here.
Mr. Hicks.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Landis,
Here.
Ms. Mellon,
Here.
Ms. Perry,
Here.
Mr. Stubbe,
Here.
Mayor Schultz.
Thank you. So first is an opportunity for citizens and visitors to be heard. You may come to the podium and provide any comment on any issue of borough business that you would like. Is there anybody who wishes to provide public comment? Sure, Tamela, come on up to the podium. I think you know the drill.
Well, first off, just a big thank you and acknowledgement once again for the wonderful people who are sitting up here and taking care of our community. It's pretty impressive, and we are truly blessed. So just want to start with that. So I reviewed the video of November, and I had a few questions on what was talked about that I wanted to ask, and then express some concerns and some information for further thought. So, Mark, you had given me most of the answers. I have a couple more that I want to ask in regards to the PFAS testing for the wastewater and the biosolids. When do you guys plan to do those tests?
Early beginning of next year.
Okay, all right. And
I did respond to your email this afternoon, so if you're going to repeat the questions, you can refer.
then I will just move on then. That's great. Okay, thank you. And okay, so I do have concerns with biosolids spreading. It's known throughout the country and other countries in the world that biosolids are filled with PFAS and other toxic chemicals and heavy metals and PCBs and volatile organic compounds, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, etc., etc. So your plans for significant capital investment for a biosolid treatment plant to the tune of $30 to $43 million could be very costly and dangerous with planning on spreading biosolids. So I just want to try and figure out if that's the right thing to do. None of the 4 recommended options deal with PFAS and other likely chemicals that are in biosolids and biochar. Pyrolysis is not tested safe and a proven method for PFAS destruction, and it can release other hazardous chemicals, as I just mentioned. And if it does break a PFAS, they can recombine and to PFOA and PFOS and other short chain PFAS. And it doesn't address the other toxins either. And so my fear is that we would just be recycling toxicity. And that's not something we want to do. So, as was noted, the pyrolysis would be the potentially ideal best scenario with dealing with PFAS. But as noted, it is an unproven technology. There's one plant at Silicon Valley that you've mentioned. I haven't had a chance to research how long it's been opened. And if they have tested their air emissions for those chemicals, biochar for those chemicals. So what I'm requesting is to put a pause on choosing one of the 4 waste management facilities until the following is completed. Test as you are planning, the influent and effluent of the biosludge and the current biosolid that is being produced. The soil surrounding the treatment plant for those chemicals as stated, PFAS, polyaromatic aromatic hydrocarbons, heavy metals, polychlorinated biphenyls, PABAs, and polyaromatic hydrocarbons and volatile organic compounds. Also, test the 2,000 acre farm field that you're planning to spread on for those same chemicals. Ask Silicon Valley if they have tested their emissions surrounding soil and biochar, and if they have tested their fields prior to the spreading and then afterwards. I'm doubtful that any of the 4 recommendations are going to be effective enough to prevent these recycling of toxicities. And if they're not, there is a solution, because that's important to not just say no. And that is to looking into building a monofill landfill which is just basically just a landfill for just sewage sludge. This would contain the sewage sludge until further treatment can, and technology is out there. As you guys know, there's a lot of things happening out there to address cleaning up of PFAS and PFAS destruction, but none of it is at a industrial scale or a cost-effective scale that doesn't take a lot of energy and a lot of money. It's likely that this will be a lot cheaper option as well than the 4 that's proposed. I only had an hour to prepare for this. There's a whole lot more that's in my head and going around and information I have, but that's all I have for now. So I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Okay, anything by Zoom? Okay, and before I forget, we did have an executive session on November 9th to discuss personnel issue. Next, we're going to move into presentations, and for this one, I'm going to go down to the podium. Actually, Sean, why don't you come down with me? You can stand. Before we got started, I said, you know something's coming, right? But no video. We had a video from Mayor Scott, and he was happy. You were happy. There's no long video and embarrassing moments. So, but there is and I'm going to give council an opportunity to say a few words, and then we'll eventually turn the podium over to you. So I know you have a 30-minute speech prepared tonight. Okay, and Carter's going to happily sit there for all of it. Okay. So number of things. One, we always joke about the 2 Seans on council. So, and now I'm going to be down to 1 after this evening. Sean and I also, we have a brother's name in common. Both of our brothers' names are Ryan. We grew up Catholic, and we're Sixers fans. So in politics and local government, as in basketball, sometimes you have to trust the process. Election cycles take time, and you often have to wait for the electorate to send you the teammates you need to get things done. At a gun violence vigil last weekend, a couple from the Shippensburg area came up to me to tell me they keep tabs on what we do here in Carlisle. And they thanked me for the work we do. I told them that we have an incredibly dedicated council, and that unfortunately, due to term limits, we'll be losing Sean Crampsey, whose election in 2015, I believe, was a turning point for progress for this borough. Don't give me that look, because I'm not going to make it through. I'm not looking over it anymore. I told them the story of my pre-election plea to Sean that we needed to pass a human relations ordinance for Carlisle so that everyone in the borough, and especially our LGBTQ residents, could feel more secure and welcomed. Upon taking office, Sean took the effort up with enthusiasm. He was an incredible partner in the passage of that ordinance. It helped fulfill a promise, and it happened in large part due to Sean's efforts. Sean spearheaded banning the box on borough job applications so that people with criminal records who had turned their lives around could get a fair shake when seeking jobs here. Councilor Crampsey knew that not only did that box impede productive reentry into society, but it disproportionately affected historically racially excluded populations. Sean was anti-racist before that was a widespread term. During his 2015 election, candidate Crampsey promised intelligent redevelopment of our industrial brownfield sites. Today we have mixed-use sites that include workforce housing, veterans housing, new parks, a new hotel, dense market rate housing, and a skate spot. Sean helped deliver this and on so many other issues over the past 8 years. He's brought so much more to Carlisle than I can ever cover tonight. He can get impassioned on issues, but he's always civil. He has a sharp mind that even his soft-spoken nature can't hide. And I began with the basketball analogy, and I'll end with some more. Sean stands up for this borough like a center, swatting away shots. He navigates the issues like a shooting guard slicing through the lane. He can post up on policy, and he drops deft political wisdom before you know it, like a sudden fadeaway jumper from the elbow. And you know who I'm describing. I just described the local government version of the reigning NBA MVP, Joel Embiid. So in a moment, I'm going to hand Sean a plaque recognizing his years of service to the people of Carlisle, but I also wanted to pick up a novelty to remind you of your time here. Sean, you've been an all-star for us, as far as I'm concerned. You're headed off council as a reigning MVP. And like Joel Embiid, who has his own Funko Pop figure, we now have a Councilor Crampsey Funko Pop figure. That one's for you. It comes with a smartphone. It comes with a smartphone and the blue suit. We put some thought into these things. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for these last 8 years as a dear, trusted colleague. Thanks to Brittany and Carter for sharing Sean with us on these evenings when he could have been home with family. We will miss you from this hall, and we know you'll just be down the road when we need you. But know that in the years to come, that your impact will be felt by the citizens of Carlisle for decades. So thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. So we will recognize you with. See, still already helping. Right, there we go. So we have a plaque that recognizes your many years of service. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Before I give Sean the podium, would council like to make a few comments? I'm going to grab my seat. It's all yours.
I would like to say something. I met Sean because when he became a board member for Hope Station, and just as he has done a lot sitting on council, his voice was heard. He participated. He was a good board member for the organization. And I also remember being in the room with the two Seans when I got interviewed for the Human Relations Commission. And so that was different. And when I walked out, I was like, yeah, it was the Seans. And people were like, what are you talking about? Because it's two Seans. But I want to thank you for uh, you made me feel like I had a friend on the board. And that's not always a situation when you're doing nonprofit, but I say thank you. I appreciate you being able to sit here on council, because who knew at that time that I'd be sitting up here and on council with you for 2 years has been great. And I know you will continue to do great things. And I follow you on Twitter, so I get to see all the wonderful things that you say and do. So thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Joel.
I just want to, I think it's safe to say I probably wouldn't be sitting here without Sean's mentorship. When I moved here in 2017, I worked early on in some campaigns, and I got to know Sean and Brittany, and realized, as the mayor said, that you don't have to spend much time to realize how the sharp mind that he has. But topic came up of opening, council seats, and when Sean says something, you listen, and he's like, well, why don't you run? And I was like, I never really thought about that seriously. And he guided me along and got me to the point to do that, and I'm glad he did. I also want to say that I think he's one of the best listeners, which is important in the job that we have, to really hear out what all of our residents have. I think we had an identical voting record, but that's not the reason I'm really going to miss you. But that did make me realize that when we connected early on, I think we saw things very similarly, both from our experiences in and out of Carlisle. But the real solace is we're not physically going to have to say goodbye to you. You're going to be around, and I look forward for my next 4 years picking your brain a lot on issues. So, but you're going to be missed. Thanks.
Thanks.
You're super awesome. And I just will miss having you down here. Each one of us sort of take the lead on certain things, but Sean is like a quiet, thoughtful guide behind all these different things. He coordinated a meetup with the borough manager of Steelton for his skate discussions well before we had a skate spot. So there's things that I will miss because you have a sharp mind, you're thoughtful, you read up on different topics, so that you bring insight, and with your job and things that are not on my radar. I appreciate the guidance that you provide because you just care, not because you want to win the discussion or whatever. Some people do that. You don't do that. But your family is just precious, and we can't see Carter very well from this direction. Yes. All right. But I am glad that you get to spend more time with him. But I believe it's only 2 years until you can run again.
So I, along with Kate and Joel, ran for re-election this year. And I think in doing that, when I was talking to people throughout the borough about running, the first question I was inevitably asked is, why isn't Sean Cramsey on the ballot this year? And I obviously then explain the term limit process, and I think there are a lot of people that not only in this room but throughout the borough that are going to be sad that you're no longer on council. You've been a very important part of this borough for the 2 terms you've been on council, and I'm really pleased to be able to call you a colleague and friend, and to have gotten to know you both through, before being on council and volunteering through organizations, and you're similar to Joel, kind of encouraging me to run for council. and then being able to pick your brain, literally sitting beside you here on anything that's coming up. Obviously, like you, we both have young kids that we're raising, and I just want to thank you for all the work you've done. I moved here in 2016, and I am excited to be raising my kids in this borough. And I know that's in large part because of the borough is the way it is in large part because of the things that you've done. So I thank you for that. And also Brittany and Carter, thank you for the time of Sean, giving Sean for coming to these meetings. So congratulations on, a job well done, and thank you for your time.
Thanks.
So I'm the newest member of council, I guess. My time of sort of becoming active in community corresponded with the non-discrimination ordinance. And so one of my first trips here to regular meetings here at Borough Hall was that meeting with the public debate for the ordinance. And I do remember being so impressed by all of the members of council who were sitting up here that night. First of all, that they could keep their cool in a very heated, very crowded room. But second, that they had the strength of will to persevere on something that they knew was right. So 2 years ago, when the vacancy came up on council, I jumped on it. I knew that I wanted the opportunity to work with this wonderful group of people. And I'm just sad that I only got to work with you for 2 years. But like Brenda said, I think you can run again in a couple of years. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. And Stephanie, feel free to throw up the timer. Before I got here tonight, I was talking with Brittany. She asked if I was going to say comments and if I was prepared. And I said, we have a big agenda. There's people here for important issues. I'll keep it short. She gave me that smile that you are all probably thinking. Me keeping it short is very hard to do. But I will try my best. And I was, reflecting. I have a bunch of thank yous, but reflecting on the last 8 years. And when I first ran, I didn't have a beard. We weren't married yet. Actually, we got married a few weeks before the election. See, my mind is still there. We didn't have Carter. I was in my 20s. I felt like a young kid. So I still feel young at heart. But looking back, it's wild that it's been 8 years. So I wanted to start, and I'll also add, after hearing all your generous comments, the mayor reminded me I'm not dying. So I will be around. I will be down the street. You all have my cell phone number. I promise I won't change it. But I did want to start out first and most importantly thanking Brittany for everything. She was my campaign manager. It's getting dusty in here. Was my campaign manager when I ran. Would knock on doors with me. Was my sounding board when people weren't nice, which happens in local government. So I appreciate, everything you've done for me. Brittany's parents are here on election day. They were always there for me, as were my parents. They're taking Carter home tonight because it's almost bedtime. So I just appreciate the circle of folks that I have. So thank you all. And Carter, he's been pretty good. And I was thinking tonight when Carter walked through the door, I remember when Sean's son was just a little bit older coming to meetings, and now he's a teenager. So time does fly. I wanted to also thank our staff. I know I say this time and time again, but I'm not kidding when I say we have the best staff in local government all around. I worked in local government prior to moving to Carlisle and got to see how it worked. And there's some good folks out there. I think our team is the best. You all knock it out of the park with your jobs. It's not easy. I always, sitting up here on council nights would look down at you all and see, sometimes there'd be Wendy's cups or food. And I was thinking yeah, these people don't get to eat. You guys, you work a full day and then you have to come listen to us gas bag for a few hours. So we appreciate all that you do. And I don't think it gets noticed always enough by the public that besides your full-time jobs, you're also assisting council. Our votes and our things that we take the lead on aren't done in a vacuum, aren't done alone. And I love now, that we have a new position, new-ish, I guess it's not new anymore, with Stephanie, so we can see on social media when Public Works is out. I think they're out today. fixing a water main break in 30, 20 degree temperatures, Parks and Rec, all the work they do, our HR team, and definitely, finance and planning and public works. I don't want to leave anybody out. You all do an amazing job, and we are lucky to get to work with you. And I don't want to forget our two chiefs. The work that you do keeping our community safe is top notch. I love how you both strive to be better, even though we think you're the best. It doesn't seem like good is good enough, and that's important. I think in the industries that you both work in, you have to be the best around. And I think we have the folks that are the best around. Even though I'm leaving council, Chief, I'd still love to do another ride along. It feels cool. You get the bulletproof vest, and I felt very safe. But your officers are the best. We're really lucky to have you folks. Solicitor Keith, a man of few words, I think, during our meetings, but if you follow news and local government, I will always argue having a solicitor, I don't think we can pay you enough because that investment we make in our solicitor is top notch. Our borough doesn't get sued for making the wrong decisions. We don't get dragged into frivolous lawsuits because we make the wrong decision. Everything we do is because Keith gives us good legal advice. It's never one side or the other. It's here's the law, and you as council get to decide. And I think we're lucky to have that guidance. So we appreciate you and everything that you do. Susan and Owen, I know Sean was making basketball references. I do think we have a dream team when it comes to borough manager and assistant borough manager. The work that you both do, again, is top notch. I see how you all deal with your department heads, deal with the public, deal with issues that come up, and I can't speak highly enough of the work that you all do. And Susan, I think back to obviously we're still living with the effects of COVID, but when COVID hit, there's not a binder on the shelf that says, here's how you deal with a global pandemic. And you and your staff really stepped up and did the best you could in really, really trying times. And I think, I know our residents appreciate that and appreciate the work that you all did. So I can't thank you all enough. How am I doing on time? So I was going through my head on how I met folks on council, and Safrania is right. When I joined the Hope Station board, we got to meet. I will say Safrania is one of the best leaders we have in this borough, on and off of council. I think you joked with me, and I think you're right. You get asked to do everything, and you rarely say no. I think sometimes it's okay to say no. But if you're at an event, if you're out and about, and you see Safrania, she's speaking on a panel, she's representing the borough, she's representing Hope Station. You really are a great voice for this borough, so I appreciate you and all your work. When Sean was reading those basketball comments, I was thinking of Joel. Joel and I, pre-pandemic, got with a group of folks in the borough to play some pickup basketball. I like to think I'm okay at basketball. Joel's really good. He's tall, so he cheats a little bit. But he's got a baby hook shot that is like Kareem. So, on the court, great guy. And then the work you've done for the borough, climate action, you name it. Joel is kind of forward thinking and really an all-star that's going to help, I think, this borough for definitely the next 4 years. Because as you see on the agenda tonight and on future agendas, there's going to be a lot more work to do. Deputy Mayor, it's funny, in the political circles and campaigning, everyone talked about, and I never took offense to it, but when I first ran, it was like, that's great, we're glad you're running, why isn't Brenda running? And I agree. Brenda was kind of this all-star recruit that everyone wanted to run because of how great she was. And I remember the conversations we had about how you felt. I think at times you could do more good outside of this structure because it is kind of stuffy red tape government. But since you've been on council, I think you've kind of broken down those barriers. You've done amazing work. I will always refer to the skate park as the Brenda Landis skate park because that's what it should be called. And I remember Mayor Scott at the time took me door knocking, and I was very nervous to knock on your door because he said, you can't mess this up. If Brenda doesn't support you, you're in trouble. I think it went well. I hope it went well. But thank you for everything that you do. Mayor Schultz, I don't know if you know this. I think back to when we first met, again, through Mayor Scott, who will be a running theme because he's the person that got me to run for this seat. He said, you have to meet with Sean Schultz. He's a volunteer firefighter. He's on council. If he likes you, you're good. If he doesn't, you're in trouble. So we got a beer at then Alibis. I was pretty nervous. I think it went well. We talked about anti-discrimination and goals and things, and then left. I came home and Brittany asked, "Well, is he going to support you?" And I forgot to ask. So I left that meeting never knowing, and to this day I still don't know if you were gonna support me. But I appreciate your leadership, your guidance. Since I've been on council, you've been a great mentor because you've been here the longest and you've seen kind of everything we've gone through. You also have helped calm me down at times. As a new council member, I could get fired up. I hope I'm a little more mature now. But I really appreciate your friendship and your guidance, and it was fun. It was a fun 8 years. Councilor Stubbe, as you mentioned, I think we met at a political event somewhere. But getting to become your friend and serving with you has been an honor. The issues that you champion are great. I hear from folks out of town that are like, you guys have open container in Carlisle, and I think of Jeff. Or you guys decriminalized or talked about, marijuana processes and things like that, and that's because of Jeff. So when I think of policy, it's hard to find someone better, both professionally and on council, that knows policy, knows how to write policy, knows how to implement policy than Jeff. I mean, you are top notch. So I think council's lucky to have you. I think all of you in your roles bring something amazing to the table to make this great team. And last but not least, Kate, as you mentioned, we haven't served together that long, but I think, council is lucky to have someone with the nonprofit fundraising experience that you have. I think our outside agency meetings have changed for the good, and part of that is because you, within that and other plans, ask the right questions. And I think sometimes we were missing that edge that you have of how are you going to get the money, what does your plan look like, because you're an expert in that field. So I appreciate everything that you do, and appreciate all of you on council. So I promise I'm going to wrap it up just with a few closing thoughts. I'm excited for Jackie to join you all. It's going to be a tough, I think this, next 4 years. You're facing budget issues, revenue issues, rezoning, replanning, rebuilding the borough. I think, the bones are there and the steps are there, but this Frog Switch project, I'm excited to see. I'll be here maybe giving public comment if you go the way I don't like, but hopefully you go the right way. And I just want to leave, reflecting on the 8 years, and I think, I don't want to speak for all of council, it's sometimes a frustration when we look out and there's no one here. Tonight, we're lucky that people are here, but I will say, in campaigning, not only for myself, but for others, when you get to knock on doors in this borough, you really get those face-to-face conversations and hear from folks on why they don't come out. And a lot of times it's because they trust you all. I always like to ask and prod, if they don't know I'm on council, like, what do you think of the borough? And it's normally, I love living here. It's a great place to live. Every once in a while, trash. The road diet still pops up and probably will for eternity. But I think, in talking with those residents, it always gave me great pride to know the work that you all did and our staff. And the last story I'll share, which I love, I knocked on a door once. I was running for re-election, and an older gentleman answered and said, I hate Borough Council. They're terrible. So we talked through some issues, and he said, I think the borough's going in the wrong direction, yada, yada. I kind of stepped back. I didn't tell him who I was. We talked through things. And then he said, but I'll vote for you. You seem good. And I left. And that made me think, the more people actually have that personal connection or get to hear from council, I think it breaks down that stigma of, hey, we disagree with you, therefore you're awful. So I want you all to keep striving, keep the leadership and the direction going. I don't think we can afford as a borough to go back, but I think everything you guys are embarking on is super cool. And I'll end with one of my favorite parts of this last year or two on council has been the biker gang. You all are awesome. I love seeing you guys out in the community. I am hopeful Carter one day will join you on one of his bikes, but I think everything you're pushing for is the right things. We want to be a safe community. We want to be safe for folks to ride their bikes, to walk to work, and to do all that. So you all continuing to show up has been a huge benefit, I think, for all of us. So I'm going to stop there. Thanks. I'm going to go home. No, I got to vote. I won't go home. I said I was going to go home, but no.
He's walking out. He's dropping the mic and walking out.
Oh, Carter's gone.
Yeah, we'll take a moment. Take a brief recess before we get to the greenhouse gas inventory.
He can come up. He can come sit.
I think he said it. Okay. Thank you. Thanks again, Sean. Mr. Hicks, greenhouse gas inventory presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Stephanie gets a few of my students prompted here, I'll just sort of give a introduction of what the background of today's presentation is. Some of you may recall back in 2020, we approved a climate action plan for the borough. That was the result of a lot of earlier work that was facilitated by Department of Environmental Protection through working through a local climate action planning initiative that brought, in our case, Dickinson College students and faculty working with staff here to do kind of the first step in doing any sort of climate action planning is to actually get an inventory of greenhouse gases. And so they did a great job that provided the background of doing some forecasting and monitoring. And then as we expected, and it's hard to believe it's already been 5 years, lo and behold, that 2017 greenhouse gas inventory is a little bit dated, and per the guidance of the global protocol that it's encouraged cities who take on these inventories do them every 4 to 5 years. So I have had the pleasure of being able to teach this work at a couple schools, one of which is Johns Hopkins University. I have some graduate students who will be speaking with us and updating, who did the inventory, will be updating us tonight. Some of their classmates worked with other municipalities in Pennsylvania who were part of that first cohort. So their classmates that you're about to hear did an update on Etna Borough. They did Harrisburg's first greenhouse gas inventory. They did Derry Township, Hershey, Pennsylvania. They updated theirs. And tonight, they're going to give you an overview of our Carlisle Greenhouse Gas 2022 inventory. And I'd like to introduce Courtney Young, Justin King, and Rory Peabody. They are from the Johns Hopkins University Advanced Academic Program, and they are top-notch, outstanding students. But the floor is yours, and look forward to hearing an update.
Thank you, Joel. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today. My name is Justin King, and I am joined by Rory Peabody and Courtney Young to discuss the 2022 Carlisle Community Greenhouse Gas Inventory. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at the agenda for our presentation here. We're going to start with emissions generated from utility consumption of electricity and natural gas. Those two emissions fall within the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors. So then we'll take a look at what else makes up those sectors. And then we'll go through transportation, solid waste, some wastewater, and then we'll take a look at the overall summary and take any questions at that time. Next slide, please. Yep, so we're gonna start with utilities, electricity, which we got data from PPL Utilities, but before we get into the data, this may be a review for some of you, but I'm going to give you a primer on how we calculate greenhouse gas emissions from electricity consumption. So like I mentioned, we receive our data from the utilities directly, an annual consumption amount in units of kilowatt hours. We take that consumption in kilowatt hours and we can convert that using a set of conversion factors known as eGrid that's managed by the Environmental Protection Agency. And that's where this map comes in. This map has a bunch of regions for eGrid, and each region is different in how they convert their electricity to emissions. Carlisle falls within the RFC East region, and the conversion factors take into account things like power plant resources, so how much coal you're burning versus your renewable generation. It also takes into account metrics regarding the transmission system and all sorts of other things to make it simple, where we can take in a kilowatt hour of electricity and have our calculator spit out the equivalent emissions. Next slide, please. All right, so now getting into the data, PPL supplies electricity consumption data in 4 categories, and they supply it for the entire zip code, 17013. And so for each of these sections, there are going to be some adjustments that we need to make so that we reflect the borders of Carlisle and not necessarily the borders of the entire zip code. The exception is for municipal. We assumed that all municipal operations fell within the borough of Carlisle, but for the other 3, we do have to do some adjustments. And so starting with the bottom, residential, we did a population-based adjustment using census values, and we found that 56% of the zip code population, the residential population, is within the Carlisle borders, and so that's how we adjusted the value that we received from PPL. For commercial and industrial, we use job-based data from the census, which we can see on the next slide. So this job data is for Carlisle in 2020, and we received a similar job report for the zip code 17013, and we categorized these sectors as either industrial or commercial, these sectors being different types of jobs, so that we could then take a ratio of commercial jobs and industrial jobs within the zip code that fell also within Carlisle. There's obviously a bit of subjectiveness to how we categorized here, but the designation matters less than the ultimate ratio of jobs, which ended up at 76% for commercial and 85% for industrial. Now, an alternative approach to this would be not to categorize between commercial and industrial, and it would be to just bundle jobs and call it non-residential, and that's exactly what the 2017 inventory did. And if you use a method like that, you end up at a 77% ratio, but we felt that it would be valuable to take a closer look at the types of jobs and splitting up the sectors, and so that's how we split up the jobs. So now we can talk about natural gas. Next slide, please. And so this is very analogous to the electricity data. We received this from UGI Utilities. They don't provide us with municipal data, so we just have the three sectors. And we don't have to also worry about an eGrid conversion factor or anything like this, because natural gas, after all, is just mostly methane. So, and we understand how methane emissions are generated. So we get the consumption of methane for these sectors, and you'll notice commercial is still the most emitting sector, but for natural gas, industrial is actually second, whereas for electricity, residential was. And that's all I have for you on natural gas.
So moving into a comparison between residential, commercial, and industrial sectors, particularly for the stationary non-utility fuel sources. So these are mostly used for heating your homes, similar to electricity uses and for natural gas. But these would be alternative fuel sources like kerosene or propane. For residential emissions, you can see, again, the electricity and natural gas, that's the bulk of your emissions for the sector. And then at the bottom, you have bottled tank or LP gas, which would be a propane facsimile, and your fuel oil and your kerosene use, which the two of those make up a significantly smaller chunk of the emissions than the utilities. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how we got to the numbers that we got to. So for these non-utility fuel sources, the first thing you want to do is create a factor that you're going to apply to the data that we pull from the Census Bureau. for usage per customer. So that is basically an average of, for a household using natural gas, how much natural gas did they use? And then applying that factor to the household data for the alternative fuel sources. So that would be, if you take a look at the graph or the table there, your bottled tank or LP gas, your fuel oil, your kerosene, and then you have categories for coal, wood, solar energy, and other fuels. The guidance methodology that we followed did not have us including those. So what we ended up with was just the fuel oil, kerosene, and the propane facsimiles. If you go to the next slide. So this is just a comparison between, this is residential. We were lucky in that there's, it's a pretty direct one-to-one comparison between the 2017 inventory and the 2022 inventory that we did. And what you're looking at here kind of is that comparison. So as you can see with the 2017 inventory, similar to the 2022, that residential electricity and residential natural gas made up the bulk of the emissions, and their fuel oil and propane categories made up a similarly smaller chunk of those emissions. If you take a look to the right, what we saw is between 2017 and 2022, reduction in fuel oil usage and emissions, resulting emissions of 62%, and for propane, a reduction of 43%. Worth noting, as we go to the next slide, what you'll see, this is some of the data that we pulled from. That margin of error category, if you take a look moving down into the bottled tank or LP gas, that's almost half of the households that were estimated based off of the census data. And then for the kerosene category, you have almost 210 for that margin of error, which is not insignificant. So for any of these methodologies, there is some level of error associated with it, and that's something to consider moving forward. And as the reporting methods get more and more accurate, the resulting emissions and the resulting inventory is going to get more and more accurate as well. So moving into commercial energy. So for commercial and industrial, things get a little trickier, one in comparing 2017 to 2022, and two in kind of the data that we have available to us. So what we had to work with was state level fuel usage data based on the sector, and that's what this table is here. So we pull that from the state energy data system, which is federally maintained. And you can kind of see for each of those categories, coal, natural gas, distillate fuel oil, et cetera, they give you the usage data for the state for the year. So we take that data, and then as Justin went into earlier, you have the jobs ratio, and we take that ratio and then create a different ratio that is the percentage of those jobs. So in this case, commercial jobs as compared to Pennsylvania commercial jobs on the whole. And then you apply that ratio to this usage data that we pull from the SEDS website. For commercial jobs, what we found was that was 0.25% of the jobs in the state that are located in Carlisle. And then what you end up with is on this next slide, the emissions totals here. Worth noting at the top, your commercial coal use, this is going to kind of be important later on. There is some usage there. You can't really see it, but it is very minimal. Again, commercial electricity makes up the vast bulk of the emissions for the sector. Then you've got kerosene, distillate fuel oil, HDL, that's your hydrocarbon gas liquid, so think propane, and then motor gasoline, your municipal electricity use, which as Justin talked about, that is all located in Carlisle, your natural gas, which makes up the second largest chunk of the emissions, and then wood use. So if we go to the next slide. So this is for industrial sector, and we're going through basically the same process for this data, except for the ratio is different. And this is coming from that same jobs breakdown that Justin described earlier. And what you end up with is 0.34% of the jobs in Carlisle, and you apply that to this set of data. If you take a look at the coal category, because this is going to be something worth noting later on. For 2017, you've got 167.1 trillion British thermal units. That's just a unit of measurement that's used to describe how to heat something and compare sources equivalent. And in 2021, you've got that 164 number, both fairly similar. And if we move on to the next slide. So if you remember from the commercial energy sector, that top category of commercial coal use was basically nil. You could barely see it. For industrial coal use, it is the largest of the emissions. And then you've got electricity and natural gas following that up, like what was traditional for residential and commercial. And then the remaining fuels sources make up the rest of the emissions. So that industrial coal use is kind of one of the questions we have coming out of this inventory that we've done. If you go to the next slide, there's a breakdown that incorporates that. In 2017, the team that did that did not include coal into their inventory. And so what you ended up with was a significant chunk of the emissions that we have in our inventory were not included in theirs. So I did some kind of quick calculations, which are not, I would say, 100% official, but had they done the same methodology that we did, which they did pull their data from the same source, that SEDS data, the State Energy Data System, and that was those two numbers that I noted earlier, the 161 and the 164. So fairly similar numbers. So if I were to, what I did is just run those same numbers through the same calculations to kind of give you guys the ability to compare, and then also aggregated commercial and industrial data, because in the 2017 inventory, they aggregated those two and called it non-residential energy. So this is just to kind of give you the ability to look between the two inventories and then compare the results. As you can see, coal for both sections, coal in 2017 and coal in 2022, makes up that big chunk of total emissions. The remainder of the emissions is that second column, and then the third column for each would be those total emissions. Ultimately, what we ended up with was about a 10% reduction in emissions from 2017 to 2022 for this non-residential section. And that's hot.
Good evening, everyone. I am going to walk you through the transportation emissions for Carlisle. Transportation is the third largest emitting sector in the community, and it emits just over 87,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. We're going to walk through emissions from on-road transportation, off-road transportation, and rail. First, looking at on-road transportation, there's three categories used to fully capture on-road activities: gasoline passenger travel, diesel passenger travel, and diesel freight travel. Within the gasoline category, further distinctions were made between motorcycles, passenger cars, light trucks, and heavy trucks to more accurately capture emissions per vehicle miles traveled. Vehicle miles traveled were combined with a transportation-specific national factor set, and it specifies the emissions per mile for different vehicle classes. Gasoline-powered passenger vehicles were responsible for the most miles traveled and the most emissions, 96.7 million miles and 41,189 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. Diesel-powered freight vehicles accounted for the second largest share, with 21.5 million miles and over 33,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. Buses accounted for only 0.83 million miles and 1,294 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So it's clear that the emissions per mile traveled for diesel freight vehicles are higher than for the passenger vehicles. We use two data sources to determine the vehicle miles traveled in Carlisle. The first is a Pennsylvania Highway Statistics document from the Department of Transportation, and this shows the percentage breakdown for different vehicle classes. Then we applied these ratios to Carlisle's specific mileage provided by PennDOT as well, and this allowed us to understand the miles traveled by vehicle class in Carlisle quite precisely. Next, we're going to look at off-road transportation. And this entry covers vehicles and equipment used in agricultural, commercial, construction, industrial, lawn and garden, logging, and recreational sectors that are powered by gasoline, diesel, and other fuels. This calculator, these off-road vehicles were responsible for 10,300 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And to note also that this entry, these off-road transportation vehicles, were not included in the 2017 inventory. This data came from the EPA National Emissions Inventory. It's available at the county level, and the most recent data available is from 2020. You're able to search by county and then by different sectors. So here we looked for mobile non-road equipment, and we're able to see agricultural equipment, commercial, lawn and garden, and it tells us the emissions for Cumberland County. We then were able to scale down to just 7.7% of those emissions because that's the ratio of Carlisle's population to the county. So there are some limitations to the precision of this data, since it's not possible to know if the emissions are spread evenly throughout Cumberland County. Next, looking at emissions from train transportation. The emissions associated with Norfolk Southern train operations were determined using an EPA-provided calculation. They were then scaled down according to the miles of tracks within Carlisle's boundaries, which I calculated just in Google Maps, so not incredibly precise, but I think it's the best that we can do unless we were to receive this emission data from the Norfolk Southern company directly. The emissions ended up being just over 1,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent associated with train travel in Carlisle. Next to solid waste.
Thanks, Courtney. So, like eGrid for electricity, and we'll see on the next slide, we do have conversion factors that we use for waste. And these are based on the composition of waste generated in Carlisle, and that composition is assumed to be in line with Pennsylvania's 2022 waste characterization study. So taking a look at our categories on the next slide, municipal waste and yard waste, we've received data provided by Jared Woolston, and for municipal waste, the composition that the Department of Environmental Protection found in their study converts the tonnage that we calculated using a per capita basis and the residential population for the borough. It converts the tonnage into the emissions value you see there. And then for yard waste composting, we have a different composition, so the factor set is a little bit different for that. But that's how you arrived to the emissions in an analogous way. For the two middle entries, we received additional data from the Cumberland County landfill regarding the volume of gas that they combusted and that they flared. And we performed another population adjustment, like Courtney mentioned, for county level that reflects Carlisle's share of the county emissions. And the values that we ended up with were comparable to the 2017 values for combustion, but for flaring, there's a significant addition because flaring actually wasn't considered in the 2017 inventory. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, now Courtney is going to talk about water and wastewater.
So overall, water and wastewater accounts for only 0.6% of Carlisle's emissions. So it's relatively small in the large greenhouse gas inventory. Emissions come from the energy used to operate the facilities and infrastructure of your water and wastewater systems. And the breakdown of biological waste also produces greenhouse gas emissions. 1,260 metric tons of CO2 equivalent are associated with the operations of the sewer plants of your wastewater treatment, and 790 metric tons of CO2 equivalent are associated with your drinking water system. Both of these were removed from the electricity calculators to ensure that double counting did not occur. Wastewater treatment itself also produces greenhouse gas emissions, the breakdown of biological waste. And so only 69 metric tons of CO2 equivalent were released from this process. And we calculated it based on the population served by the facility. So the entire facility's service area was included in the calculation. And we chose to do this because the facility is owned and operated by the borough. And so all of the emissions we thought should be included in the inventory. This is slightly different than the way it was done in 2017, with just the population of Carlisle being included in the calculation. So we do see an increase in emissions associated with wastewater treatment because of that change in methodology. So that wraps up our sector-specific briefs. We're going to look at a few specific activities that stand out in the data, and then we would love to take your questions. Here we can see changes between the 2017 and 2022 inventory. We didn't have time to go into a lot of the discrepancies and differences in this presentation, but we are sending to you a memo that will go into these changes more specifically. The diesel passenger vehicle increase really stands out on this, though, at 199% increase, so I wanted to address that. The reason you see this drastic increase is a change in methodology. In 2017, both the diesel and gasoline passenger calculators made an assumption that 95% of all miles were driven by cars and the other 5% by light trucks. In 2022, we used this entry specifically to capture emissions from buses, which are classified as diesel heavy-duty passenger vehicles. So the factor set attributes many more emissions per mile for heavy-duty trucks than for passenger vehicles. So that's why for each mile, you see a huge increase in emissions, and you see this almost 200% increase.
And another point that I wanted to mention is the greatest decrease here from 2017 to 2022, which was municipal solid waste. And the decrease there is sort of two-pronged. There was a reduction in the tonnage of waste, but there's also a reflection in the change in methodology too. So if you recall, there's a factor set that comes from the Department of Environmental Protection, and that was based on the 2022 study. The 2017 inventory was actually working with a 15-year-old study, and the composition of waste has changed significantly since then. The biggest takeaway is that there's a lot less paper in waste, and the paper being emissions heavy, there's a lot less emissions per ton of waste now than there was in 2003 when the original study was conducted. And so that is responsible for another shift in emissions reductions here. And with regards to this slide as a whole, there were a lot of methodology changes and a lot of calculators that were included in this inventory that weren't included in the last inventory. And so a lot of our comparisons tend to be relative rather than absolute compared to the 2017 inventory, because if you do compare absolute numbers, there were significant greenhouse gas emission increases for 2022. But like I mentioned, a lot of that boils down to methodology and not necessarily a change in actions, although there has been some change there. And well, return to the previous slide just real quickly, and then another point here is that for any change that you see that might be minor in value, that it's likely captured within the sort of the error bars that aren't reflected on this graph. So when you see that residential electricity went down, and that's going to be by less than 0.5%, in reality, the methodology could account for that. So you have to take the actual quantity with a grain of salt and just with a little bit of a range reflected for the error involved.
So similar to what Justin's talking about, just kind of revisiting that coal issue. These are the emissions by source for the 2022 inventory, and at the top you see that commercial electricity category, and then second there is the industrial coal that we went over earlier. So you want to take into account the source of the data and the error that introduces. We got this from a state level data set and then applied our Carlisle specific factors to it. And so worth noting there that the kind of the how, the why, the where those emissions come from might be worth investigating, considering how significant the industrial coal played a role in the total emissions for the inventory, and whether or not that's truly indicative of what's going on in Carlisle, because those come from a state level data set and are not necessarily exactly the amount of coal that's being used in Carlisle for the activities associated with their industrial sector. But I know we wanted to thank you guys for letting us be a part of this process.
And I'm going to interject, sorry, before we wrap up, there is one last thing I want to mention that I forgot to mention earlier. There are slivers of red and purple on this pie chart, and those slivers reflect the upstream effects of natural gas and electricity consumption. So for natural gas, 0.3% of all gas distributed is leaked to the environment, and there are emissions associated with that, and they're aggregated and reflected in this entry, but in the actual memo you'll see them reflected separately. And electricity has a similar process where 4.5% of electricity is lost to distribution and transmission, and that's an RFC East specific eGrid calculated value. And so we overconsume, or Carlisle overconsumes by 4.5% for every kilowatt hour of electricity. 4.5% of that kilowatt hour has to be overproduced and generates additional emissions. And so that's where your upstream impacts come in, and that's again aggregated with those values. Sorry to interrupt you, Rory. Just wanted to make sure I got that in there.
No worries. I was just saying thank you guys for letting us be a process. I know that we were all really excited to present, and this was a really cool opportunity for us. And I think if we have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
As the other counselors are gearing up their questions, I did want to put up one more slide that reflects a lot of the comments that you had. So you heard a lot of conversations about this wasn't in the other study and it's included here, and here was an assumption we made in this study. So what I wanted to spend just a couple minutes on is getting us into apples and apples comparisons. I do want to say the methods used in the 2017 study were absolutely fine. We were able to do some additional calculations that are recommended but not required by the global protocol, which explains, and they discussed in their different sectors some of those areas. And what I wanted to just do grossly, and in my hand scribble I did about 2 hours before the meeting here, was just give us a checkpoint of like, with all these differences, where are we really compared to where we thought we were in 2017? So this looks familiar to anybody who was involved in that first inventory. This was our projection. If you look at the blue line, that's sort of our business as usual case. So the table basically summarizes all the emissions that you just heard from Courtney, Rory, and Justin. If you add them all together, they come up to 347,000 metric tons, which my job here is to make you not panic and explain why we're actually, I would argue, right within the width of the blue line. So I think Rory echoed one of the major areas where we followed the protocol, but I would say of that 112,000 in industrial energy, we had about 52,000 that we applied the way we were supposed to on the industrial sector. I'm comfortable conceivably removing all of that, in addition to the fact that we included off-road transportation, as Courtney explained. That was not included at all. When you add the last item that Justin was talking about for fugitive emissions on natural gas and grid losses on transmission and distribution, you already go down from 347 to 277,000. And then the additional factor is that we included some non-utility fuels that were not included in the 2017 study to the tune of about 18,000 metric tons. And so when you factor that in, you actually get at about 240,000 metric tons if we're actually comparing exactly what they did in 2017 to the subset of what we did here. I would suggest our emissions were greater than we estimated, but we still have the ability to compare the values that we used, that they did do in 2017 to do what's most important, is track and monitor how well we're doing. We still have the ability to do that. I think realistically, I would say we're probably up at around 277,000 and probably always were. It's just that we're now reflecting, particularly in the transportation, fugitive emissions, and some of the non-utility fuel estimates that were not done. We will continue to add to that. So again, if you look at 2022, again, as my back of the envelope sort of numbers, when you take away all the things that weren't done in 2017, we're actually at about 240,000 metric tons, which if you eyeball it at 2022, that's pretty darn close to 240,000. So we really haven't done any policies that we would have expected grossly to change these numbers. I mean, we're looking at this value as sort of a business, another data point to kind of verify that, yeah, our projections are about what we should expect with no policy changes. And we should continue to do this, probably again in 4 or 5 years to see if some of those effects across the sectors, if you see that sort of downward spiral, those were the net effects of several policies we reflected in our climate action plan that we modeled that would actually reduce reductions moving forward. But I just want to put that in perspective, but then open this up. And by the way, sort of like a proud father watching their kids hit a home run, my students are awesome, and you just got a fraction of their interest and passion in working in our community. But I wanted to turn it over to anybody who had questions for them.
Yeah, Courtney, Justin, Rory, thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions from council?
I had a question. So it goes back to what Joel was just saying of trying to understand upticks and things like that. As we have further development in the borough and influx of residential units and things like that, that will also increase. But I guess when we're trying to tell the story to the residents, some folks are, anti-development and don't think that that we should have like a point where we don't increase anything. I just wanted to kind of understand how we tell this story and weigh things when we also are trying to build a dense community that has lots of reasons why people want to have businesses here and develop, even though we're pretty built out. So I guess that's sort of where I am when we're trying to figure out if we're doing the right thing. We are still going to get some upticks just by getting further development, correct?
Yeah. I don't think we spent much time in class looking at we didn't have the luxury of looking at forecasting and modeling in the future, but the business as usual case you had actually did factor in estimated population increases. The only thing it didn't estimate was GDP increases, because you expect more commercial and industrial activity. That was considered to be flat, but it did reflect population increases. And I think if you look a little bit deeper here, there's some slightly good stories happening. We are seeing a little bit of a fuels transition. You know, we need to do fuel switching. We need to have more things that were burned with natural gas and combustion electrified. So moving forward, we actually want to see electrification numbers go up, because as they go up much slower than if the same amount of energy was done in any other fuel type. And that's actually a fundamental building block of decarbonization, is to electrify. And so, you know, some of the policies we've talked about, whether it's building standards, whether it's encouraging, you know, and educating people on the, you know, economic benefits of mostly highly efficient electrified, you know, water heaters and HVACs, those absolutely have to be an important part of reducing our emissions. I've always considered you know, when we look at our goals in the climate action plan, none of them are based on a per capita basis, and you know that might not be a bad idea. You know, it doesn't change the fact that absolute emissions are what warms the earth. But no, I think it is important to say that, you know, we're not going to stymie our growth. We're not going to be a borough that says we don't want you here because you emit too much carbon. What we want to do is we want to have a trend where our emissions per capita are continuing to trend downward. And I think, you know, we constantly, you know, we complied with the protocol. We added some things, you know, methodologies evolve. We had the luxury and time to do a few other calculations they didn't before. And the key is just to make sure we have a narrative that we can convey, you know, to when we're making decisions, whether it's land use, you know, whether it's building codes, whether it's, you know, what we're doing with our municipal buildings. I'm convinced that we, you know, despite some of these changes, we have a pretty steady narrative we can share with our residents.
Any other comments or questions? I thought you were reaching for the mic.
I was just going to thank the students, and I'm not your professor, but I'd give you an A+ if I was very nice, so thank you.
I have a couple people saying you're giving them an A+, right? And that's a lot of pressure to get, right? But,
they're all smiling.
All kidding aside, great job. This is exactly what we're looking for. As one of you, I think Courtney alluded, we have an official memo that goes and summarizes and goes maybe in a little bit more depth in some of the things that were reviewed. We'll obviously share with everybody. They also are putting together a climate action strategy paper that actually takes a look at our current climate action plan and makes some observations and potential, you know, mods or adjustments that we might want to consider to our existing plan based on the knowledge we've learned over the last 5 years of what our emissions profile looks like. So we will also provide that at a for staff and the public consumption that I'm sure Stephanie will be happy to post on the webpage. So there are no other questions. I can let my students go back to.
I was going to throw something out there.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I do that and I defer to everybody else, and that's what happens. I think we already sort of addressed this in the per capita. I mean, I think that's an interesting fact to be able to provide, one, and two, if we're a municipality that's, you know, trying to lead in the area on this issue, we're all better off if we're reducing per capita, having more people here than some other municipality that might not be doing anything on emissions. And I know that the data is somewhat probably frustrating in some ways, or the lack of precision in some of the data, but the important takeaway is the trend over time. regardless of the precision of that data, the trend will indicate where we're headed. And we've chatted about sort of regionally how we calculate our emissions, that even if more folks sign up for electricity suppliers that are coming from green sources, we're stuck with what RFC East is providing us as a region. There are limitations on it, but again, the important part of this is just the trend lines going forward and as we enact policies in the years to come. So thank you all. Thank you all again. Thank you, Councilor Hicks, too.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm sure the class would love to see a Joel Hicks skyhook. So if you've got a video, take it.
We'll work on that. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Next is the consent agenda. So this is a list of routine items which do not appear to be controversial in nature and which probably do not require additional discussion. They can be acted on by one motion in their current form. If discussion is desired on any particular item, any member of council or the public may request the item be removed from the consent agenda, and that item will be considered separately. Is there anybody from the public requesting an item be removed? Is there anybody from council requesting an item be removed? And I'll entertain a motion on passage of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by the Deputy Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Mellon. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion passes. So that completes the consent agenda. We're going to move on then to the regular agenda. There are no tabled, continued, or recurring items. There are no reports from elected officials. So next is reports from committees. Councilor Stubbe, Budget and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of items this evening. First, related to the budget, which we obviously had a public hearing on earlier today, in which we had presentation on last month. So I'll take each of these one by one, and then there'll be some other motions following that. First, I move that Borough Council take action regarding the adoption and implementation of the 2024 budget to approve the 2024 budget resolution.
Motion by Councilor Stubbe on the approval of the 2024 budget resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council adopt an ordinance setting the real estate tax mill rates for the 2024 general purposes and fire service appropriations at rates of 3.05 mils and 0.752 mils respectively.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to pass the ordinance setting the new millage rates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. I'm sorry, this is a roll call. Mr. Secretary, the roll, please.
Mr. Crampsey,
Aye.
Mr. Hicks,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis,
Aye.
Ms. Mellon,
Aye.
Ms. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe,
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
Aye. Motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council adopt an ordinance maintaining water rates.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to adopt the ordinance maintaining water rates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? This is a roll call. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Crampsey,
Aye.
Mr. Hicks,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis,
Aye.
Ms. Mellon,
Aye.
Ms. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe,
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
Aye. Motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council adopt an ordinance maintaining sewer rates.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to adopt an ordinance maintaining sewer rates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? Now I'll call the question. This is a roll call. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Crampsey,
Aye.
Mr. Hicks,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis,
Aye.
Ms. Mellon,
Aye.
Ms. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe,
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
Aye. Motion passes.
Next, I make a motion that Borough Council adopt an ordinance maintaining stormwater rates.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to adopt an ordinance maintaining stormwater rates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? Now I'll call the question. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Crampsey,
Aye.
Mr. Hicks,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis,
Aye.
Ms. Mellon,
Aye.
Ms. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe,
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
Aye. Motion passes.
Next, I make a motion that Borough Council adopt an ordinance setting the fee of $80.25 per quarter per residential dwelling unit for trash collection and setting the fee of $7.92 per additional tag or tag bag effective January 1st, 2024.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to adopt an ordinance setting the fee for trash collection. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? I'll call the question, and this is a roll call. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Crampsey.
Aye.
Mr. Hicks.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis.
Aye.
Ms. Mellon.
Aye.
Ms. Perry.
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe.
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
The motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council adopt a resolution committing funds for future economic activities totaling $25,000 from the parking fund.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion adopting a resolution committing funds from the parking fund. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council approve of using American Recovery Funds for fiscal year 2023 revenue replacement in the amount of $3 million.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion for council to approve the use of American Recovery funds for fiscal year 2023 revenue replacement. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council approve a 2023 transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund in the amount of $3 million.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to approve the 2023 transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council assign fund balance as of December 31st, 2023 in the amount of $3 million for the Capital Projects Fund for future capital and council initiatives.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to assign fund balance in the capital projects fund for future capital and council initiatives. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Is there any discussion?
Just one quick thing, since it might be confusing to folks just hearing us talk about $3 million repeatedly. Maybe someone could briefly describe what this three-step jump is so that people could understand a little bit more.
Mr. Jude is ready at the mic.
It doesn't have to be very, but just so they know what
Sure. So essentially what we're doing is the borough was awarded American Rescue Fund grant dollars, and in order to recognize that the grant dollars, we need to identify certain aspects of governmental services that we wish to cover through the use of this grant. So the very first action we took is recognizing that we had need to recover funds out of that grant and are drawing down the $3 million. The second action is to just move the funds. We have to have council take action to say we wanted to move from the general fund where the revenue is now and put it in the capital projects fund. And then the last item is to basically identify that we're not just going to use it for any capital projects, but our intent is to meet at a future time to identify how to specifically use these grant dollars.
And that will be coming in the coming year. In fact, we'll have in the first quarter of the year, we'll be setting out the plan for the use of those funds. Thank you for slowing us down and giving Councilor Stubbe a bit of a breather. Is there any further discussion? And then I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council adopt a resolution authorizing the disposition of surplus personal property in the form of a decommissioned 2019 Ford Police Interceptor vehicle and to transfer said property to the Carlisle Area School District.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to approve and adopt a resolution to send the decommissioned 2019 Ford Police Interceptor to the Carlisle Area School District. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Crampsey. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council reaffirm the mayor's execution of a master services agreement with Shenandoah Cable Television LLC for additional internet and related services at the Carlisle Police Station.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to reaffirm the execution of master services agreement with Shenandoah Cable Television LLC. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Cramsey. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
And I then move that Borough Council approve a total care support contract with Hinton and Associates for information technology network support for a 1-year period effective January 1st, 2024, subject to the Borough Solicitor's satisfactory review and approval.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to approve the total care support contract with Hinton Associates, subject to the Borough Solicitor's satisfactory review and approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Cramsey. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before concluding my report, I just want to again take an opportunity to thank staff for all of the hard work you do in putting together a budget. Obviously, we just kind of run through these motions now, but that kind of belies the fact that this is a essentially year-long process to put this together. And anybody who had the opportunity to view the budget presentation we received last month kind of gets that in more detail. So again, thank you. And with that, I'll conclude the Budget and Finance Committee report this evening.
Thank you for running through that very tedious report from your committee. And no one will blame me if you don't want that committee come the next term. And Councilor Cramsey stole it from you at the last meeting. So, ERCP.
I just have one item tonight. I make the motion that Borough Council adopt an ordinance amending the code of the Borough of Carlisle with respect to Chapter 83, Human Relations, to include updated language with respect to the definition of discrimination.
The Deputy Mayor makes a motion to adopt an ordinance updating the Chapter 83 of the Human Relations, Chapter 83 of the Code, Human Relations, with respect to the definition of discrimination. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Mellon. This is a roll call. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Cramsey?
Aye.
Mr. Hicks?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis?
Aye.
Ms. Mellon?
Aye.
Ms. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe?
Aye.
Mayor Schultz?
Aye. The motion passes, and
That completes my
concludes the
report.
report. And on that item, it's bringing the code up to date with the state statute. Next, sustainability and community planning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I have 6 items tonight. The first 3 pertain to the earlier public hearing we had, and I'll just remind those who are keeping score that they will be roll call votes. But the first one is that I move that Council approve a resolution amending the Carlisle Borough Comprehensive Plan pursuant to Section 302 of Article 3 of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code.
Councilor Hicks makes a motion to approve the resolution amending the comprehensive plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor,
I
please.
think this is a roll call.
It's a resolution. The next couple of roll calls.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes. Next 2 we're going to catch.
Yeah, thank you. And I move that Council adopt an ordinance amending the code of the Borough of Carlisle, Chapter 255, by amending the zoning map through rezoning specified parcels to urban mixed-use district zoning.
Councilor Hicks makes a motion to adopt the ordinance amending the zoning map through rezoning specified parcels to the urban mixed-use district. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion? And I will call the question. This is a roll call, please, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Cramsey?
Aye.
Mr. Hicks?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis?
Aye.
Ms. Mellon?
Aye.
Ms. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe?
Aye.
Mayor Schultz?
Aye. The motion passes.
Next, I move that the borough adopt an ordinance amending the code of the Borough of Carlisle, Chapter 255, by reducing minimum parking requirements for dwellings.
Councilor Hicks makes a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the zoning chapter of our code regarding reducing minimum parking requirements for dwellings. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question, and this is a roll call. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Cramsey?
Aye.
Mr. Hicks?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis?
Aye.
Ms. Mellon?
Aye.
Ms. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe?
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Next, I move that Borough Council direct the Borough Solicitor to draft and advertise an amendment to Article 25, off-street parking and loading in the Carlisle zoning ordinance in accordance with the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code to increase the permitted shared parking separation from 300-foot walking distance to 1,500 feet from principal uses measured along lines of public access, which includes walking distance in commercial zoning districts C1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, urban mixed-use district, the R4 town center district, and the R5 traditional resident district.
Councilor
and,
Hicks.
and
Oh,
to
sorry, go ahead.
schedule a meeting as indicated on March 14th, 2023.
I jumped the gun. Thanks. Councilor Hicks makes a motion to direct the Borough Solicitor to draft and advertise an amendment regarding shared parking separation as described by Councilor Hicks. I'm not going to run through all that again. And schedule a public hearing on March 14th, 2023 at 6:45 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by the Deputy Mayor. Is there any discussion?
I have one thing. With us taking action during the consent agenda to schedule regular council meetings for 6 p.m. next year, would we want to schedule this at a different time, or is the intention for us to have the council meeting and this to be after?
That's a good point. How do we want to? I'm going to punt that to the Borough Manager because that would maybe mean a 5:45 meeting.
If
Here.
you're available at 5:45, we can schedule it for then. Good catch.
Does anybody? I know it's a few months out, but does anybody anticipate having difficulty at 5:45? Okay. You show up anyway. Yeah, you're our fan club. Okay. All right. So we'll amend that. Is it friendly amendment to the motion 5:45? Okay.
Tried to get one through the wickets there, but we couldn't. I, since we're in still comment, I did want to mention this is the culmination of some pretty long work done. You know, Jared Woolston sort of orchestrating land use and zoning subcommittee, and a lot of folks from different boards and commissions and volunteers have contributed some really good thinking to these, very explicit changes that we strongly believe will help the walkability, bikeability, and safety, and also improve housing density in the borough. So, yes, this is the culmination of a lot of work, and I really appreciate us getting to this point.
Yeah, thank you. So with that friendly amendment to the hearing being 5:45, I assume accepted by the Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
I'll call the question. Is there all those in favor? Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
And I move that Borough Council approve the 2024 Uniform Construction Code fee scheduled for Barry Issett and Associates for construction plan review and inspection services for the Borough of Carlisle.
Councilor Hicks makes a motion to approve the 2024 Uniform Construction Code fee schedule. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
And my final item, I move that Borough Council approve entering into a professional service agreement for a not to exceed amount of $35,750 with ACS Group Incorporated to provide an architectural survey subject to Borough Solicitor approval of the contract.
Councilor Hicks makes a motion to approve entering into a professional services agreement with ACS Group to provide an architectural survey subject to the Borough Solicitor approval of the contract. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works, Councilor Perry.
Hello. So, I make a motion for council to authorize the award of the unit price construction contract for the Carlisle Connectivity North Hanover Street project to the lowest responsive bidder, Rajo Incorporated of Harrisburg, PA, in the amount of $7,464,007, subject to the contractor providing the required bonds and insurances for the project, approval of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to award the contract, and securing sufficient funding for the project.
Council Perry makes a motion to authorize the award of the unit price construction contract for the Carlisle Connectivity Project to Rogel Incorporated, subject to securing sufficient funding for the project. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. I didn't think about this until reading this again this evening. Do we want to say securing sufficient funding? Does securing, just for clarification, securing sufficient funding include, if needed, drawing from borough reserves or American Recovery Funds in the future? Is that how we're all potentially interpreting this? I'm seeing head nods. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
I move that council reject all bids received for the downtown traffic signal equipment upgrade project and authorize staff to rebid the project based on a revised scope that reflects available grant funding.
Council Perry makes a motion to reject the bids received for the downtown traffic signal equipment upgrade project and to authorize staff to rebid the project. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
I move that council approve the November 9th, 2023 proposal from Gannett Fleming Incorporated to provide engineering services related to advanced planning, pilot testing, and preliminary design of process improvements for PFAS treatment at the Carlisle Water Treatment Plant for not to exceed the amount of $25,000.
So, subject to the
I'm sorry, I stopped because she was.
So it should be $270,000, correct, Mark? Yes.
two.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm looking at the wrong one.
270,000.
Parenthetical's
So
incorrect.
there was,
Yes.
there's an error.
The
there.
number, not
No,
the
it's
parenthetical.
fine. That
I-
was on me.
Gannett Fleming doesn't want to reduce that. No.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
All right. So 270,000.
270,000, subject to the borough solicitor's satisfactory review and approval of the amendment.
Okay. Council Perry makes a motion to approve the November 9th, 2023 proposal from Gannett Fleming to provide engineering services to get rid of those nasty PFAS at the water treatment plant for an amount not to exceed $270,000, subject to the borough solicitor's review and approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
I move that council approve the final compensating change order to adjust the estimated quantities included in the contract bid to equal the actual quantity of work completed on the 2022 water main replacement unit price contract, decreasing the total contract price by $213,174.
Council Perry makes a motion to approve the final compensating change order to adjust downward the estimated quantities included in the contract bid. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
I move that council award the bids for purchase of various chemicals used at the Carlisle water and wastewater treatment plants to the lowest responsive bidders as outlined in staff's attached bid tabulation. The annual contract term shall be from January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024.
Council Perry makes a motion to award the bids for the purchase of chemicals used at the Carlisle water and wastewater treatment plants to the lowest responsive bidders. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Under public safety, I make a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the code of the Borough of Carlisle adopted by ordinance number 2032 and thereafter amended with respect to chapter 244 vehicles and traffic to add one on-street handicap parking space located adjacent to 44 North Bedford Street and remove one on-street handicap parking space located adjacent to 37 East High Street. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Any discussion? I'll call the question, and this is a roll call. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Cramsey,
Aye.
Mr. Hicks,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Landis,
Aye.
Ms. Mellon,
Aye.
Ms. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stubbe,
Aye.
Mayor Schultz.
The motion passes. That concludes my report. Next is new business. This is a second bite at the apple for those who are still here with us. If you'd like to comment on anything regarding borough government, now's your final opportunity of the evening. Is there anybody who would like to provide any comment? Okay. And do we have anybody by Zoom at this point? No. Okay. Oh, they're there. Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. So move on to reports from council members and staff. Nothing from Council Mellon. Council Stubbe, I'm skipping you. Deputy Mayor.
I actually do have just a few quick things. I promise I won't keep it too much longer. But I did get to hang out with a whole bunch of different kids this month talking about government, and I don't think I bored them too much. But I had some Boy Scouts, I had some Girl Scouts, I had some Boy Scouts that were girls, and I had 3 third grade classes. It was fascinating. Actually, when Sean said about how he's not dying, but they did ask me what it felt like to get elected, and I was like, it's kind of like going to your funeral and everyone's saying everything so nice about you, but you've never heard it before from so many people. So that was joyous. But and the other thing I wanted to bring up is we enact things here. We enact resolutions, and we enacted our Vision Zero resolution just a couple months ago, and since then. I have observed, there's been 1 pedestrian that has died, and there's been 2 crashes at North Pitt Street and High. And so one of the conversations that I have routinely with people is, why can't we change, lights? And it goes back to PennDOT, and then I start feeling like maybe like that's an excuse, and I don't want to. Basically, I've wanted to have prioritize pedestrian lights at our lights along Hanover and High specifically. We have a thriving downtown community, businesses, and we want it to be better and better. But that is a limitation, and I know that it can be hard to work with them and to sway and it can be exhausting and costly, and then they can also say no. And all these things are reasons why we do get worn down. And we do have a wonderful committee that we have, with in-house staff. So I do want folks to know that we're still working on it, and we aren't ignoring these things. And I want people to be able to navigate safely, no matter what means. And I do think that we're going to, it helps when we have community members that can help us tell the story as to why we need certain things, even though they might be outside of the scope of what the box that PennDOT expects sometimes. Last thing I'll say about it is Strong Towns, which we won, Strongest Town Contest in 2016, right? So one of the things that they talk about is something called the popsicle test, which can a kid go to a corner store, get a popsicle, walk back home before it melts, and do this all safely, right? So I would like us to have the Hachi test. And can someone go across town, be it on foot, in a bike, even driving and getting out of their car and having to go, I went there and I had 2 chili cheese dogs today. I don't get the full Hachi. But, I think that it's one of those crashes happened at Phase 2, right? So these are places where people migrate. And I just want to, I like to think about things uniquely Carlilian. And I think that that's one way, if we're going to go to the places that we meet up, how can we ensure that it is as safe as possible? And I know that we're doing the work, but I just want to publicly say that we are trying, and we are still trying to engage everyone. And it's really unfortunate that these other happenings have occurred. But anyway, so that was my ponderings today. So it's my Hachi test. And Sean, you will be missed. Thank you.
Councilor Hicks.
I just wanted to add, what's happening here, the incidents that Brenda brought up were reflective of trends that are happening nationally. The vast reason for increases in traffic-related deaths aren't car to car, they're pedestrian-oriented. And, I think we need to make sure when we're thinking about traffic safety, we keep folks who aren't in internal combustion engines front and center in all of those planning decisions.
Thank you. Councilor Perry.
I do not have anything to report, but I will say happy holidays to everybody. Please stay safe.
Thank you. For Manager Armstrong, anything from staff?
Yes, I know it's getting late, but because this is our last meeting of the year, and this is Councilor Creamsy's last official meeting, while I know that your colleagues paid tribute to you earlier, I'd be remiss if I didn't just say a few words as well about you, Sean. You know, the one thing that always impressed me about you is Sean Cramsey has a very caring demeanor and contagious enthusiasm for this community, this organization. I always welcomed his emails, his calls. Especially, he noted about the pandemic, and the one thing that he didn't note, but I recall vividly, is he was always there, especially during the pandemic, to offer his perspective, sharing of ideas, unique things that we could potentially advance with respect to the small business community, our residential community, and showing your support during that time. It was very welcomed. I appreciated it. I will miss your enthusiasm, the smile that you always had for our employees and my office. And I hope that you will continue to visit us, even though you will no longer be serving in the capacity of council member. But thank you for your service, and Britt, thank you for sharing him with us. We certainly appreciate it. I also want to thank council for your leadership over the course of this past year, and your continued willingness to assist whenever we call upon you. It's very, very refreshing that each and every one of you are open and supportive. So thank you. And my leadership team, as we say, I got it easy. I'm surrounded with a very good talent pool here. However, the people that are doing the real job, the boots on the street, are the 110 employees, the uniformed and non-uniformed alike, that fly under the radar many times. And we all owe them a debt of gratitude for the services that they carry out on a daily basis. They make all of us look good, and they take their jobs extremely important and to heart. They care about this community. So I just want to thank all of them as well. And I always like to embarrass Solicitor Brenneman, but seriously, Keith is one of these individuals that I feel I can always pick up the phone, text him, and rely upon his wisdom and counsel at any time. He keeps us out of hot water, keeps us on one track and steering in the right direction. So thank you, Keith. And that's it. So happy holidays.
I'm going to give Councilor Cramsey the last word in a moment, but Stephanie, could you bring up my photo? It's a good segue from what Borough Manager Armstrong was talking about. So this was a few weeks ago. We had a water main break down off of Garland, and it came in when I was supposed to be going to the Y to work out. And I told my wife that I was going to head to this and then get some exercise in at the Y. And usually the borough manager is able to make it. She wasn't able to make it out there that evening. It was frigid. It was very cold. I'm standing there taking this photo. I have gloves on. I have a winter coat on. You can't see, but our staff there to the left, you kind of see his hand in the frame. He had a T-shirt on, which I still don't understand. It was wet. They're down in this hole in the road, and they're doing this work for about 5 hours or so that day. When they could have been home that evening with family, and this is just one example of what the borough manager was just talking about, of our staff going out and doing things that make our residents' lives better, make our jobs easier each and every day. And I could go right down the line here to my right and thank every one of you. And I'll say, you know, a few months ago, I was sort of in the doldrums, wasn't feeling so great about how things were going. Just was kind of at that place. You know, we all get there in life from time to time. But I have been absolutely reinvigorated by all of you and the work you do every day. And don't make the face, Amy. And I can cite examples. I probably wouldn't touch on each and every one of you, but if I don't think that I don't mean the same for each and every one of you. Chief O'Donnell, I'm going to wind up going right down the line. Chief O'Donnell, you know I love the fire department and everything that our volunteers do, and you keep our companies, although they do well on their own. I know you keep good communications with their companies and keep things moving. And people, and I've said this before, when people ask, well, you know, how do we know someone's going to show up when my house is on fire? You know, our firefighters show up, largely volunteers, and the chief is an important piece of that to make things work. Amy, you worked hard. I probably drove you crazy directly or through the borough manager on the co-responder program, and I really appreciate all the work you put into that, and that's gonna bear incredible fruit for years to come. Once we get that in place this coming year. Andrea, I don't know what's, you know, the parks are often overlooked, and it's unfair. I know not by the deputy mayor, but you've done amazing work. We had you weren't there for this meeting we had with some folks from state government, and we got compliments on our parks as we gave them a tour of a number of sites. And I wish you could have been there to hear how wonderful they thought our parks were. And that's you and your staff making that happen. These are my Christmas presents to each of you. I'm sorry it's almost 9 o'clock, but I'm not going to stop. Richard, I love every presentation that you give, although I tease you about it. You keep our finances in line. You keep us informed. I know you do probably millions of things every day that we don't see, and that again goes for all of you. We appreciate that. We have a built-up borough. The budget's difficult. Expenses need to be watched carefully, and you all do that for us every day. Jared, you and I we're going to have some time in the car in a couple of months. We're headed to a Mayor's Innovation Project meeting, so we'll be able to chat about any number of things on our way down to DC, including your. But you have really, Councilor Hicks talked about our land use reform committee and some of the work here again bearing fruit tonight. And you've been a great part of that because you have a vision for how you recommend things to us. I know you try to stand back and you're not forcing anything down our throats, but your perspective has been invaluable in those meetings. And your preparation for the meeting tonight when we had a number of hearings was noticed, and thank you. Mark, we got to hang out a little bit today, and again, like one of the things that has really it sounds odd but has invigorated me is, you know, dealing with these issues with the wastewater plant and the water plant, the PFAS, and all these public works projects. Mark, I know you work tirelessly and have done so for years here for this borough, and we appreciate everything that you've done. Chief Landis, I love the mustache. I gotta say, all right. I already told you that. It's tough to run a police department. We all do what we can to make organizations run. I have a small organization that I run. You have many more people that you're responsible for. You're there making certain that our residents are safe and secure throughout this borough, and your officers, and pass this on to your officers, of course, too. We know they work long shifts at odd hours, and that job can be exhausting, tedious, boring at times. I'm sure, although they probably appreciate the boring times from time to time, thank you for everything that you do. Mr. Snyder, thank you for pitching in as secretary. I know it's been a challenge. It's not in your wheelhouse, but you've done a good job. Some typos and stuff tonight, but that's all right. because you're an Eagles fan, and you know we've known each other back when you were the finance director, and you came back to the borough. I was excited for your return, and continue to work hard and do the things that you do. Solicitor Brenneman, I've had people, I've had issues at the county from time to time that I need to review as the solicitor to the assessment board. I've had municipal issues that I've had to review, and occasionally I hear, well, Keith Brenneman reviewed that, and I said, well, if I come to the same conclusion that Keith does, I know it's solid. If I come to a different conclusion, I better double check myself. So we thank you, Keith, for this past year and your years of service here. And Borough Manager Armstrong, none of this happens without the team that you put together and you manage every day. And I know you've gotten feedback about the culture that you've striven to create here, and that's showing really positive moves forward for this borough. So thank you. And I would go through council, but you all know I love you, and and I want to get home, and I can still catch the end of the Sixers game. So, thank you all. And I know I'm getting there. So I'm going to. I don't know if I can do this or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. You get the last word, Sean, and I'm going to defer my authority to adjourn the meeting to you. So it's all yours.
Do I get the gavel?
You can. I've never used it, but if you want to do it, you go for it.
So I've waited for 8 years to slam the gavel. But again, I'll just be super brief. Again, need to thank Brittany, and if taking care of Carter when we're at these meetings wasn't enough work, now she had to sit through a 2.5 hour one. So doing God's work. But honestly, everybody have a safe, happy holiday. Can't thank you all enough. Keep up the good work, and for council, keep going forward. Don't go back. And
before you adjourn, Stephanie, I'm sorry. We love everything you do. I almost forgot you. I couldn't see it behind front of his chair. So we love you. The borough loves you. And sorry, Sean.
No, I'll just build on that. I think I said it at a meeting before, but dealing with the internet is gross and awful, and Stephanie does a great job when people are very, very mean. So thank you for that. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting.